All right, great. We're going to get started. I think Chase just ran out for a second. He'll be back though. We have a quorum this evening. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Gonna get started. Yeah. Does anybody want to be the minute taker?
I'm good.
All right, thanks. How about timekeeper? Yeah.
That's saying the same as
Yeah.
Right.
that's official. Who did this? Was that your son?
Thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah.
Move to accept minutes. Second.
Great. Motion passes and minutes are accepted. Does anyone have any changes or additions for the agenda?
The tiny one that I emailed you earlier in the day.
That's right, yes.
My 3-month term to start those co-chairs. The next meeting, April 28th, and I'm out of state. So, would someone be willing to fill in? Take over? I can delay my term by 3. I can delay it by 1. I can.
Could be a nice opportunity for somebody who hasn't had a turn and wants to take a turn through being a co-chair.
I think everyone knows the minimum is meet.
Are you intuiting that Jimmy really wants to do it?
Yeah.
Let's put Jimmy on. Why not? It's called externalization of cost. An actual thing. Yeah.
And the other thing we can.
We'll try it.
You want to do it for 1? You want to do it for 3?
I think you try it for 1 and then we move you back
Fine.
3. Does that sound okay?
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's perfect.
And then you guys, we can all take it up again.
Right.
Sure, you're.
So Brad, for just the April meeting, well, and then you volunteer again at some point.
Yeah.
But the minimum of, I think everyone knows the minimum expectation is co-chairs meet and formulate an agenda. Maybe there's a little homework to do in that process, and then the other, of course, is do what Melissa is doing now, is run the meeting.
Sorry, and thank you.
Absolutely. Very welcome. We help each other out. And did you have something additional or change to the agenda?
On the orders, it's gonna ask, recreation is coming before the appendix of the college. So actually, maybe 2 questions. I was thinking that since the psychological stuff touches on everything recreation among them, but also forestry, education, agriculture.
Yeah, we had some couple reasons to leave it that way. We just wanted to turn through as much of that as we can, not being one of the biggest sections.
Right.
So that's why we're hoping to keep it in that position.
Well, and it's a long, currently a long section, and I would say massive, the recreation section. And we have a high priority, which is to prepare for our meeting with the select board, or offering a draft management plan to the select board on June 2nd.
June 2nd.
June 2nd.
But
Yeah.
the actual plan will be May 22nd.
So for our credibility, I think getting the recreation section cleaned up over the next 2 meetings is very high priority.
So
Bear that in mind, I would say.
there.
See, Michael, because that was. Stuff from the budget. All that.
Switch it around. I'm gonna have the timekeeper, we're a hard stop
I've got to
on
go.
that. Like literally, if you're talking
Yeah.
and we're on that, it's cut off.
You might be able
We've got
to.
We've got to
You want?
keep that timeline.
All right, so we
So,
can gauge.
I'm happy to switch it. Do you feel as strongly about it? Or not? Starting at 6:40.
Unless we can economize on another.
Unless we can economize somewhere else for ahead of time, but I really, if we've economized, I'd like to devote that to the recognition.
There's
Second question, why was before the objective and background?
Well, because it was a document that was submitted for it. We have really limited time, so we're gonna take a look at that first.
Yeah, the content apologies. Big job, right?
Yep, so our plans were to take a quick look at the appendix and then head over to the document. And again, we have 20 minutes. We have 20 minutes, so. No, we just don't look at the appendix.
So when you see switch,
Do you have like a peaceful signal that goes off so you don't have to cut someone?
the other thing is informational. There's an informational point. I think everybody got the email from Duncan Wardwell saying we've got to address the ethics code. Did everyone get that on the deadline? Not only doing some training in the state ethics rules, but also, I don't know, signing that you've done that and that you agree to the ethics. That's the deadline of June, I think. But
Right, you have to sign it, but then we have to devote a part of a meeting to the content.
that's right. Yeah, so we got to slide that into the agenda, right?
But
So,
not this
yeah, and actually, given the select board's expectation of a management plan, they might want to go with May.
Okay, May. Okay, do we have any updates from the Conservation Commission?
That's a great question. I don't think so.
Okay,
Right up my notes, what we talked about last time that pertains. Yeah. I think we're fine, especially considering this is an additional meeting on the books. Normally we're just meeting once every month, not once every 2 weeks. So I think I'll make sure if there's anything to convey that I'll mention next.
sounds great. How about the Trails Committee?
I relate our conversation around trying to wrap our heads around how trail condition posting would happen, and that's a kind of fast evolving question. And so it sounded like Jim, you were updating us that it worked well working with Adam on Adam Morse, who is a Richmond resident, who's the director of Fellowship of the Real, which manages Mobs, Heinsberg Town Forest, Saxon Town, Essex Town Forest. So a lot of the surrounding town forests, and it's really important for them to be in sync, because if one is left open, if people are looking to ride somewhere and all the areas are wet and it's appropriately closed in all places but one, then everyone will go the places. And so then we've run into that in the past in Richmond, because we'll put up ropes and we have this separate thing, but it gets awkward if someone drove 45 minutes and then their ethics decision is a little different for running or riding or whatever. So there was advice of the Trails Committee was really looking for continuity there, kind of in line with what you're saying. We're going to talk with Richmond Mountain Trails, where who's the guy, Jake, that had been doing, I think I might be getting his name wrong, but he's someone who was also helping with the updating. He and Adam Morse had been working in tandem and just seeing if they were interested in doing the other town trails. So that's where proposing to them, would they also, and there would still be communication with us. So in that scenario, Andrews decided to hop on there, we would have a liaison with them and would just say, hey, we're in line with the other trail systems, or think this trail is in bad shape, let's leave that closed. Yeah, but the default would be for them to be in line with the other trail systems.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So that's an option. Yeah. I mean, the other side of it is if you don't open them when they're actually in good shape, people figure it out and then they stop putting trust in your system.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, I know this is totally dry or it's not being damaged. Why is it none of it? So there's
Yeah, you just can't fall asleep on that job. Not something you can.
no, so I think the idea would be like the default is going with what the other area trails are doing, and we would have a liaison that could override that in any.
Sounds good. That sounds good.
Okay, so should I relay back to them that we would be in line with that, what Trails Committee is thinking?
What do you think? Do we need to take a vote?
Probably a votable.
Well, a point of information is, if this is going to happen and move forwards once it's all coordinated and agreed, people need to know about it, and the town website would be the
It is going to get embedded. So there'll be an embed of the whole town trails map, which might be managed by different groups. You know, there'll be an embed that will be color coded as red closed, yellow caution. On the Richmond town website, the same embed will be. You guys have a new link to it, right?
Yeah, it's on our website.
Yeah, and so once it's really up and running, and it'll also be on Richmond Mountain Trails. We can put it on the Andrew site. We can do a QR code.
On Teams. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I could probably help out with that. I bet you there's a way for us to just put the Andrews property on the Andrews Forest page of the Richmond website, and then maybe the Trails Committee has all of the Richmond.
Yeah, like on the town site, because in the public's mind, they're not differentiating between, like, all of a sudden you cross from Preston Preserve into Cochrane's, right? They're not thinking about land management. They're just thinking I'm running from one across the ridge or whatever.
Yeah, anyway. Each tree is assigned to. So. Yeah. Municipal. Has on that. But in terms of impediment.
I think you can. Actually, I'll look right now. Fellowship. Yeah.
It sounds to me like we're generally in agreement that having one, basically the default is that it's similar to the openings and closures around ACF. And then if we want to get into the nitty gritty about this, maybe we do it at a future meeting, because we don't necessarily have, the time or any of the specifics that we need to talk about the embeds and the administrators and all that stuff.
We're generally on board with the idea. We'll keep delving in further as we go along here.
Yeah. So I just went to Carse Hills in Huntington, and this is Carse Hills, but it also shows Hinesburg Town Forest and Sleepy Hollow as closed, and like here's Cochrane, so you can see them.
Right, you can scroll through there.
The list of trails is limited to just.
Yeah, the list of trails is just.
Okay, well, that sounds perfect. Then we could select the trails for ACF, and then if people want to scroll around the map, they can and see like, oh, well, it's VYCC open, or it's.
Okay.
And there should be an administrator for.
And VYCC is on here already. You can see that's.
But you're proposing that Adam be the administrator of the signage, electronic signage for Andrew?
So what we did is.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Got it.
So we should have an administrator from Andrews as this develops.
Well, I suppose my question would be, we're a little past time, so I'm curious if we want to make a decision now, or if that's relevant for this season, like we need silence right now, or we can talk about this.
I would guess there'll be room to update our decision at next meeting, so if we give it a little time next meeting. We'll have. The real trail closure season is usually nowish. Like the time when, if it gets really dry, things open, but they're generally closed.
That in some ways, if the ACFC or the ACF trails are on trail works, then whoever's managing the surrounding trails is going to mark ACF as closed as well right now.
Yeah,
According to our, whatever we end up in management.
yeah.
plan.
So
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. That sounds great. And move on to public comment. If there's any public comment. Let's do that now.
Just Dan at this point.
Great. Well, seeing none, we're going to jump into the meat of the meeting, the management plan. So Ian's going to do a real quick 5 minutes on what's happening with the education section.
Yeah, there's a correspondence in the packet, which I think everyone would have seen. I think it was circulated at the time it happened, showing that Josh, as town administrator, says it's okay that having Daniel and Jeanette as members of the Conservation Commission and also with other qualifications to write about education. It's fine for them to be like submitting their material to us, providing we get to see it and approve it. And there is actually a draft which showed up about two hours ago. So we will, my intention is to get that into a format that we can circulate and, individually add comments to, as we've been doing with other parts of the management plan. So stand by for a draft which integrates the contributions, the input from Jeanette and Daniel, and that'll be circulated soon, I hope, this week.
Great. All right. Does anybody have anything to add around education? Good. Okay. Great. So we're allotted some time to work on the comments in the draft management plan. And we are open to, we have some sections listed here individually that we want to work on tonight, but there's the place where we left off last. We had kind of hit your section that you had worked on, we then glossed over because you weren't here. We're open to suggestions for this time frame about where people would like to work for this chunk of time in the management plan, knowing that we have the reclamation section, the eco appendix, the Indigenous kind of chunked out for their own times.
Ask a couple questions, but just generally. There's, and I was focusing on the reclamation. Why are there two reclamation sections?
So the way it's kind of split up, I think it's true of most sections. There's sort of like the preamble, or like the background, I guess, and then there's the actual like plan goals. So it's kind of all split up where it's like you get all like the history and then you get the.
Do we have to do it that way?
I don't know. I think
It's a
that,
little confusing.
yeah, I don't disagree. We had been talking about like trying to cut down on some of those like sections up front, moving stuff to appendices and trying to like cut out stuff that seemed irrelevant because it's a lot to read through to get to the actual.
Right. I was looking at the Orangeburg Town Forest up management plan, and they don't do that. They just have their preamble is just the first paragraph, and then move right into it. There's their goals. More clearly, if you're interested in recreation, you go to that section, go background, and go on to.
So are you suggesting that each section would be broken out and it would basically have a little history and then the actions, or maybe we just take the entire, historical context and just move that to its own context?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
people want to know.
There may be some, maybe recreation rangers, not as much, but certain like forestry or agriculture, there might be some pertinent information that you can quickly put out in a paragraph. And then we're going to what we have decided is a strategy.
So what we inherited was the latter, which I think you're talking about, Jim, which is to have each major heading have its background material and then have its objectives and actions. And the next section, which might be natural resources, would have its background. So what we inherited, it was rather difficult to find the action, the objectives and actions, so that all the background.
Same thing.
So my next.
So it was consolidated, but I think that the table of contents and actually the subject headings could be reorganized or renumbered to make it clearer that there's a big section at the top, which is history, background, existing conditions. And then there's a subsequent section, which is management plans. Or we could go back to the way it was.
So,
What most town forest management plans do, which is each category is by itself. And we consider things that should be in the appendix. That are not goals, actions, guidelines. And we just look at it that way. Just a little bit of context and then the action items. Everything else goes into the appendix.
Yeah,
we
there's
can do that. This is just a drawback because of time. We've got to have this ready to ship out on May 27th.
I don't see how we're going to that point without making it out a very full appendix. Much more trimmed down.
Well, we could do that. I mean, we could do that tonight.
That'd be great.
We take the recreation section when we get to that, for example, and this right here, that's why that goes to the appendix and it starts here.
That alternative drafted. And how we got, all the objectives and stuff on the top. Yeah, and then the background.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it slows it down.
Yeah, it seemed like your first half really, you stuck to that and then you got a little more.
Okay, well,
You're right, maybe, and that, if we're gonna do that though, I do think it needs to be in every category. Then each category is, okay, preamble, and then goals, objectives, management guidelines. And nothing else. The appendix would be, a huge wealth of information, that's great.
yeah,
In terms of,
I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, how do you feel about tonight, since we have recreation on that, we at least do that tonight? And like that can be our obviously we can move through that. And then if that works well, we can try to speed it up to do the other ones if everyone's in agreement to do that. And I think maybe we won't have too much disagreement. We're not going to get rid of the material. We're just going to leave it.
So all of section 2. Yeah, because section 2 basically has all of this for all these sections. One is the general property description and background. 2.2 is the geography. 2.3 is climate, and then we get down to recreation 2.9, and then we continue on. So basically, I think all that duplication that makes it a little hard to get through until you try to find the section you want to look at is all in section 2. So we could just keep editing the document as we were, just to keep our momentum, and then at the end, basically just say, you know, in our May meeting before it goes to select board, just say like, all right, well, everything we've edited in section 2, let's just put that in the back, you know, and essentially turn it into one giant appendix called history. And then you want history, you know, historical context of anything, you know, then you have it there at the back. And nobody has to do that to find the section forward. I think that would probably be the easiest way to do it without like cutting out each section, like subsection of section 2, and then putting them into their, you know, into their categories later.
Yeah.
Basically one business.
So let's say conversation of the center goals.
Yes, like in the section, in the actionable section that's going to be the non-appendix, yes, it would just be the goal and objective.
Then that's what we would talk about this evening.
So what
Yeah,
the,
we go through each section.
on the table of contents, as I've projected them up here, it's like the first 18, 19 pages of actually the background history, existing conditions, and then 3.03 management plan from there on page 19. That's objectives and actions broken down by the same categories.
All right, so yeah, when we get to recreation, let's give that a go through, like, let's go through and do it as a trial one. We have a few more minutes before we move on. And, I'm wondering, do people want to turn through what we didn't get to worked on, which is the power line, right of way, agriculture parts that you worked on? And
Sure.
we have like 5 minutes to turn through that, see if we can check off that whole section. And what
And that section is 210, correct?
starts at 210, that's right. Is that right? Yes, it starts at 210. And we had kind of started this meeting, realized we kind of guys. Be wonderful if we could just like check off that whole section into legal is ready.
So that's 210 to 211.
So isn't this?
Yeah, all section 2 would be appendix.
Fine.
It can be a pretty stuff. We just need to have what I guess I'm looking for as far as everybody's eyeballs on this say, is there any disagreement on what we do?
Yeah.
Does everyone disagree? 2.1 through 2. What is it? 1.
2.10 to 2. Right, so everything between 210 and 3 goes. Yeah.
Is there any reason to this? Why is that?
I mean, I think it works in the appendix. I mean, if you're, I guess, unless we're choosing to create basically an entirely separate document, you know.
Maybe that's not.
Like
How does that?
like an ACFC.
Well, we were historically up until 5 years ago, looking to have, in particular, Maplewood be a lessee of the 2 meadows. And we were trying to give them, keep them in the loop, but we'd like them to be lessees of the 2 meadows. So that is part of the reason.
Just interrupting. If I could just interrupt, there's a text, there's a chat from Cecilia saying apparently the microphones still aren't working too well. This one of them is
It might be.
uh,
I don't think it's that mic right in front of you. I think it's
okay.
so, whatever you.
I don't know, maybe the other microphones have a manual switch that you need to turn them on. I don't know, but I can only really hear the front of the table.
Yeah, it sounds like the computer.
Okay, well, let's try if anyone else try to talk directly into a microphone. Make sure you're close to a microphone and see if that helps.
Did you hear that one, Cecilia? No. So
Not at all.
You can see they're not dancing on the mic.
Is there a audio? Oh, so bottom left-hand corner where there's audio. Can you click up on that and then, oh, yeah, it's a microphone array. We could try one of the other ones.
Maybe I should turn on the thing that shows text as people speak. Oh, but if it isn't picking it up, then it won't be able to translate it or write it. Okay, I hear nothing.
Try that one. This is where we were again. Yeah, and it's hearing me.
I see a little bit.
There's a microphone on the lower right. Can you see that?
No.
On the lower right.
Oh, yeah.
Of the lower right of the screen.
That'll be the computer mess.
Yeah, I think this is just general general permissions. I don't even know where these microphones are connected.
Blue cable. Which is, I don't know where that goes. Seems like it's hooked up to this. This one, but I don't know where this. Got that.
It's properly plugged into the
Oh, boy.
Yeah. I'm just curious how that's.
Wait.
Okay.
Not as other stuff.
Well, they're.
This one. The block.
Was
This is.
VLT has some documents to review. And they were told that. I've not received an email that they.
I was just curious.
But.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the town's done its part. The utility's done its part. We're waiting for VLT.
Okay, Cecilia, I'm sorry, we haven't had much luck in trying to fix it, so we'll try to move on, and if someone wants to say something substantial, we'll try to have them come right up here and speak into the microphone, because it's more than just a short remark. But that, I think that's the best we can do at this point.
I'm gonna try calling Duncan.
Oh, and he's gonna call Duncan, but, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for
Yeah.
trying. I don't want to hold up the meeting
Well,
anymore.
If someone has something substantial that they want to say, we'll have them come up here to the computer, because it looks like if that's the only one that's working right now. So, okay,
To
so,
Dave's point, I mean, agriculture easements should be in the document, but they can be written in the document.
okay.
I think there's agricultural, it's agricultural not associated with other areas and benefits. Like,
Yes.
you said.
Yes.
So that's where it has to be. How many cows are.
The only things that are one part.
Does anybody have any objection or changes to any content, and then it sounds like it's gonna be changed or, how it's presented?
Well, question, I'm looking at this side. There are specific points.
Regarding this section.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna, well, circle back to right. You're wondering if lines 35 and 41 conjecture. Multiply 35 and 41 things. So I'm not sure what that was. A reference to.
I don't think that must be the same, because that's the last line.
Yeah.
We're on this BE version.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is BE note, this version reflects the CFC section two.
Version from which,
Right.
From which.
And what I did was I took the language that was there. I moved it, changed where it was, and much other than just updated.
And I think the red text that we're looking at is what you added,
Right.
or maybe changed so that the red is your input.
Well, I mean, to Jim's point, I mean, the action objections and the rules that are in here is the part that the farm can use, the 2 fenced-in meadows, and then how many animals you can have in those meadows. And then there's the part about the easement rules and who has the ability to change them. I mean, that I think both of those things need to be in the management plan, since those are rules that.
Once.
Well, how would they do it if they weren't in the management plan?
So.
Ah, gotcha. And then once that happens, got it. And then it comes here and we make an amendment and then.
Exactly.
Okay,
But in the meantime, right?
sure.
So, given that nobody has to change this.
So long. Can we put it into, that's not, well, management, then you're covering the instance. Anything that's not, an action or a concept at this point, move it to a separate talking about this table. Or not. Delving into the minutia of it.
I agree. This is not a new deal, but just history. And
We could throw it out. We can
Well, they thought of us and how well.
Second, how willing would you be to kind of do that, like,
I'd be happy to.
just make one list of everything that's gonna be appendix oriented, and then another list of things that are staying, which are actionable and guideline. And, nobody has any major issues with content, so we'll kind of take that as this section is all checked off pending. You'll bring it back and put it back in.
Yeah.
That's great. So we're not gonna lose content.
And it's just, all of what we've talked about is moving to the appendix unless it's actionable or guideline. Thank you.
Duncan just got back to me and I couldn't hear everything he was saying, but the gist of it was speak to the into the microphones, and I think he means the ones that are on the table. He knows this problem and he says that seems to be the best he can suggest at this point.
Yeah, we can do a test if you want. I'm sitting here, so if you guys want to try testing those, but sometimes they get upgrades. We've been having upgrades, so sometimes the mics don't always work.
They're not working. Yeah.
That guy worked, huh? No, okay, take it back. This guy worked, or is it just the computer mic?
I think it might be.
Just the computer mic?
Well, that was.
No,
That's on the next.
that's worst case scenario, it's just the computer.
Yeah, it's still very muffled from my end. And Ian, you might go to the bottom right tray where you'll see like the NDI thing. Make sure that's set to the right audio, or make sure your Zoom audio is set. But yes, the room doesn't sound clear at all.
Yeah, when I select the microphones,
You sound great, Ian. Yeah, you sound great. No one else sounds good. Which maybe, yeah.
yeah, this seems to be the best microphone, and we've selected the microphone array Intel Smart Sound technology. That's the one we're using.
Right.
Well, I think we're kind of going to like NDI, like down, you said bottom right.
See that little box on the right next to the microphone thing? Go down to the bottom of it, and go over to there's a little block box.
To the right, like
Go to the left. Back right. Back in front.
I think so, yeah, so click on that.
That's the one that got the camera working. We right-clicked on it. Ah. The level, we can go to plus 10 decibels, as that helped. Yeah, there's a setting there.
There's one that says unmute, or no, mute. That's it, like,
Interesting is that, yeah, it's not giving us like an input option, it's just giving us volume.
Yeah, under the options for microphone, it was set to 0 decibels and I put it to plus 10. So I don't know if that helped. That was from the
No, it's either usually in the Zoom audio settings where it's at the bottom left where you get your audio settings. You can change different audio settings, or it's on the very bottom left right tray. Yes, or it's on the very bottom right tray where you get the NDI settings on that computer. I can't simulate that from here, but it might be the audio settings on the bottom left of the Zoom.
Okay, I'm looking at Zoom. I've got settings, I've got audio profile, and it's set to auto right now.
Yeah, see if there's any other options and start switching it up, or go to the one, like I said, the bottom left, or sorry, the bottom right has the NDI ones, but it sounded like you had that one set up all right.
So we did just mess with the NDI stuff in the bottom right, but I think in the left, we're still using the computer microphone.
I'm using the microphone array.
Try to switch to like staying assistant, like one of those.
Or if Brad does it, maybe it'll catch audio.
Yeah, I mean, mine will definitely catch yours, there's no question. I mean, Brad's will probably catch yours. But, you know.
Good thinking.
Hopefully we don't get feedback, but the mic should be.
These mics are not doing anything. Yeah,
Yeah, we can try calling MMC TV. That's the other option. But yeah, from my end, I still hear some of you. You can try to pass the computer around, but it's not great volume from my end.
Duncan, can you hear
I
me?
totally agree with that. So I hate to, rain on the parade.
Mhm.
I would just make sure we change the audio back. Oh,
Yeah. Can you guys hear me, Julian?
Yeah, I can hear it. I can hear most people if you're not talking over each other.
Right, right.
How about me?
No, Brad just came on loud and clear right there. So Brad might have his computer on, which might get us, but he's gonna get feedback if we get it from the other computer.
The closed captions seem to be getting the sound.
Yeah, the sound does sound better now, all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's up.
exactly.
Now it sounds a little underwater.
Yeah, we're getting the feedback.
You could turn your mics on, but your speakers off if you're using
Right.
other laptops.
Yes.
Alrighty.
Even that might get a little feedback.
Okay.
This might be as good as we get.
Okay.
Yeah, if you'd all have to like,
Mute Brad, unless you're gonna talk.
There we go.
Getting bored, better than getting bored.
You've had experience, haven't you?
Yeah, that's a meeting with a select board.
Well,
Yeah. It was like 5 minutes of total chaos. Where everyone's like, what is going on?
that was
It
great.
just kept jumping from person to person.
Yeah.
It was like some flower. Everyone's
Am I in the right
like,
place?
Try to lead the discussion.
yeah.
In the history of the ACFC. One among many.
Another question,
Okay.
which is, have you guys had a chance to look at this? Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, so this is something, it's an appendix that Brad wrote to what was the section, corresponds to the section and the plan. So,
Oh, wait, sorry, you moved to a different section. What section are we on now?
so.
Just what's on the screen, Julian.
Okay. Okay.
In response.
Transportation structure, I took a lot of the natural history stuff from the original plan. I built the stuff. And, the regular sections, it gets more quickly into their business and such. It describes the structure as, really borrowed from Vermont Conservation Society, which is what that whole biofilm thing is also in sync with. Which I figured would make sense as we're trying to map things.
What, you can unmute yourself now.
I think it was working. Yeah.
Well, you know what we need to do is, until we get comments from the audience, we can do that. Go for it.
Great. Yeah, that works. Okay. So anyway, the structure of this goes along with Vermont Conservation Design, which looks at ecology from three levels, landscape level being huge. You know, where does this forest fit in with the grand scheme of things for our part of Vermont and even beyond? Community level gets you down to natural communities and similar features. And then the species level really gets down to those things that are specific things that are important to specific critters, like let's say ledges are to mass stand is to bears. Mass stand is to bears, for instance. So that's kind of the structure of this. So this just walks through the different conservation elements at each of those elements. Okay. So with landscape, contiguous forest is really important. So we've got these, you know, the state's got these big forests. We don't want to chop them up into a lot of little forests because a lot of species bear move, need all that space to move around and breed and migrate, meet each other, mix up the genes, all that kind of stuff.
Is there any, there's no possibility of that with this parcel, right? It's conserved,
With that,
not splitting it up.
not split, well, fragmenting it
Fragmenting.
other ways with disturbances, not physically splitting it.
So, I guess the question I would like to ask everyone is, so we have this before us, we have what's written in the original management plan. How do we want to handle this? How do we want to integrate it or any of it? How do we want to integrate it? Can you pull up the section, as well? That's what's in the management plan right now for people to look at.
The actual management, this is all background on it. A lot of material that was inherited from the existing management plan, but it's structured according to the three levels that Brad has described. So, I mean, personally, I don't see anything controversial. I think it's an improvement. So, yeah, I guess I agree that we should move. Unless anybody's seen a problem with this material, then let's move to the management objectives.
So this would be the appendix for that section.
Yeah.
It's background material that might be on it.
And is it replacing something in the draft revised management plan that we're working on? And
Yeah.
So what section, so that people are aware?
6. Oh, thank you. 6 and 2.9 maybe? No.
6.
2. So to back up, there's some of 2.2 is combined in there. There's 2.5, of course, and 2.6 probably are the main ones. And 2.3 climate, there's references. So those get consolidated into this.
Yeah,
That's
so
the
it
idea,
was
the
called-
natural history.
Yeah, this is the table of contents. So you're replacing 2.5 and 2.6 with this material.
2.5, 2.6, and then go up to 2.3. All those 2.2s.
So each of those items would still have associated goals.
No, they're actually not. They're just background. So they're in this section here.
So
Well, so I'm
so we
saying,
have the 2s for the 6. I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So 6 rather still have associated goals.
Yeah.
Six
That's
would,
all- that's all-
Yeah.
That's all-
But a
Yeah.
lot of those following things below with the appendix.
a lot of the things above, the 2 point,
The twos would go.
the twos
The
would
twos,
go.
but also 6.1, 6.2, these landscape level elements, right? That's.
The descriptions of them, yeah, there are goals though for those. But we don't go into the, why a contiguous forest is important in the front part of the thing.
But so, like, you would have a goal that said, we would like to have it contiguous.
Keep it contiguous.
Yes.
That's
right.
in the, up front. In the back, it says, here's why contiguous is
And do
important.
you have those somewhere as well? You have.
Yeah, they're in the, but we're not gonna talk about those tonight, I guess.
Oh, so hang on just a second. So I just want to characterize this and where we are right now. So we're proposing replacing 2.2 through 2.6 with what Brad has written as an eco appendix, and all of that moves to appendix status. So 2.2 through 2.6 comes out of the management plan, moves to what Brad is replaced by what Brad has written, and moves to the appendix. Is that accurate?
No,
With one exception.
With one exception, which is.
2.4 is the cultural history.
what we're saying on the screen now.
No.
Okay, except, you're right, I just forgot to say except 2.4. So 2.4 is an exception. So 2.2, 2.3, 2.5, 2.6.
Yeah, there you go.
Is replaced by Brad's eco appendix and all moves to appendix.
In some parts of section 6? Yeah. In some parts of section 6, is that right? No, section 6, I can't talk. Section 6 is not a holdover from the old stuff. That's a suggestion for the whole thing. So 6 is kind of it right now. 6 is the distilled objectives. Okay. And stuff. With, a hint of, a little bit of preamble in there, just for somebody who stumbles on that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like the basis section.
Yeah.
Given that it's about 5 after 7, are we ready to move on to recreation?
Motion about that, or just, I think it's a great
We
idea.
should, you're right.
Does anyone
I'll make
a motion about
This change up that has been proposed. Anyone needs a refresher.
Being that the eco appendix would replace the items 2.2.
2.3, 2.5, 2.6. Replace those, and all of the new material written as eco appendix will be placed.
I'll second that. Is that a motion?
Well, I'm not supposed to make a motion
I
as
thought
the
Ian made-
chair.
The co-chairs
Yeah,
can.
we can, if it's not so controversial, I can make that motion
Okay.
from the chair.
I'll second that.
And Jim is seconding. Any discussion of that motion?
I guess we had previously talked about moving all of section 2 as to an appendix. And then this is some of the sections within 2. So is the goal here to have this be its own separate appendix, or to basically collect all of the historical stuff and then nest this like within that?
No, it's the former. This is kind of a distillation of mainly the 2s that we, those 4 or 5 2s that you listed.
So
it doesn't,
Okay.
it's not gonna have every word that was in there, because some of it, honestly, there's, we talked about, geology at such a high scale that I just make editorial
okay, well that's
decision to condense it.
so it doesn't need, if we have this ecological resources and stewardship section, then there's no need for it in the history appendix at all.
No,
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to clarify to make sure that we were on the same page there. So separate appendix. And then we would essentially strike those from section 2, which then if we lift and move 2 to its own appendix, there would be no redundancy between.
I think this process maybe gets repeated
There would be.
Could be, yeah, for other sections. Depends on how, it could be we can collect the rest into just one appendix that's history. There's a lot of data here, so it kind of warrants its own.
Yeah,
appendix.
so we retain, do we retain 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4?
So no, so the motion was for 2.2,
Yeah,
2.3, 2.5, and 2.6.
yeah, I don't think the eco appendix really includes 2.2, which is geology, topography, and climate, and it doesn't
I
include,
think it does.
well, 2.3 climate, is that right, Brad? So
It does.
It does.
It does.
There's a section on bedrock and superficial geology in the appendix that Brad's.
Okay, is it? Okay.
I think that's where.
So we're replacing 2.2, 2.2, 2.3, not 2.4, but 2.5 and 2.6, however it is.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? So do you want me to repeat it again? Replacing 2.2, 2.3, 2.5, 2.6 from the revised draft management plan with the eco appendix, which will all move to an appendix. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Okay.
I was voting for approval.
I'm so sorry, Cecilia. I'm sorry, what did you say?
She voted to approve.
Approve. Okay, thank you.
Brad, mute yourself if you would.
There was a comment up there that said, this is insane.
That's all insane.
They're all Yeah. It was a miss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the caption said all in favor.
I raised the hand. Count myself.
So are we moving to section 6?
Congratulations. everybody. Next.
So we're moving to wildlife natural resources stewardship, which is section 6.
Recreation
Oh, okay.
Thank you for all of that. So we're gonna move on to the recreation section now. So that was a great,
Which
we
is,
got that turned out.
yeah, so section 7, recreation management. And there's an important note at the top of this from Brad. As you'll see below, there are many issues with this section, ranging from its flow to repetitiveness to occasional defensive, exaggerated, or misleading language. And then there's the length, the inclusion of unnecessary text. So this is Brad, proposing a reworked, shortened alternative to the two recreation sections, 2.9 and 7 in the document.
Now that document has been in our packet in the past, but is not in it this evening. The link is in.
Yeah.
So we can, just before we dive into that. Just asking a more general question, do people have suggestions of how they'd like to go through and work with this section? We don't have to treat every section the exact same. We're open to, it's a big, heavy section. We're open to any ideas and alternatives for how to work through this.
So have people read Brad's,
The new version?
I have not read Brad's, when I looked at them, I'm not totally sure how to figure out what the comments are referencing. Maybe I'm missing a really.
did you see his rewrite though?
No, I haven't seen the rewrite before.
Okay.
I thought the rewrite might be this one. I think there's still, there's still maybe some useless questions that I'm probably but there's
Do you want to have us take a look at what?
We could take time right now.
Put that up to Brad's.
Yeah, I just had it a minute ago, and I think it's important to note that the existing recreation section has a lot of material that we inherited and a lot of added material from public comment, from Arrowwood and other sources. So it's now 13 pages long, very inclusive, got some sections that are sort of really discussion issues rather than factual.
There's a lot of material in the current regulation section.
Yeah.
Can you pop up what Brad wrote?
So
onto
what
the
Brad
screen?
wrote is half that length. It's 6 pages. So I'll try and bring that back up.
The appendix you wrote maybe is.
Okay, is it showing?
To the right.
For some reason it's, I gotta stop.
Well,
It was just on the screen. You could.
Yeah, I know, but okay, it's just, I'm seeing it. Is it there? It's on both screens. Okay.
I especially like that it's organized with objective. You did a really nice job of that, but that's a great way to organize the sort of conversation having. So.
I just wondered, you know, for people, just like you said, some of the evidence is stuff. Let them go, you know, right to the, it's sort of like the town plan. Although that has pretty long preambles.
Yeah, I think it's really good, Brett. It's really organized. There's,
I was just saying that the original, or the existing draft has 13 pages. Brad's has 6. Very difficult to compare the two, and I was trying to get a sense of, is there anything missing? The only one I detected, but I didn't go through each one line by line. There's nothing about dogs in Brad's proposed shortened form, which,
oh
you
yeah,
know, that's an important topic. That needs to be brought in. There may be other things that could be found if we, you know, scrutinize a comparison one with the other. Yeah, it was in a.
I deliberately left it out.
Yeah.
I deliberately. I deliberately left that out, figuring that a dog policy, you know, something awful happened in there, and the city committed dogs, and somehow, boom, change it. You know, it kind of goes back to it. There's something in the last meeting which said we pulled something up. And said it really doesn't want an action plan, you know, there's more of the administrative thing that should be a document, definitely new policy. And to me, it's something that goes on the kiosk, goes on the website, all kinds of readings. And there's pages and pages of rules for the problem. And I think we definitely got a problem. And we had a problem on the call. Meaning, I don't even this with this ordinance sentence. Yeah,
Well,
which I think we have. It has to be under voice control. But, you know, in the forest, maybe that's not enough.
Well, the
Yes,
original proposal that was from the last summer working groups was that dogs be leashed and
Not above the power line.
and not above the vast trail itself, power line area. So that was where we had landed on dogs, but that was never voted on.
so that differs from the town ordinance. The town ordinance says leashes and voice control. And so we proposed to go beyond that.
We did.
we did, because it didn't the Autobahn have a similar policy, Melissa?
Yeah, I don't know what their current policy was, but their policy
Else, but no dogs leashed or unleashed on the open trails.
Yeah.
Brad, are you saying that it's be, like the community says, rather than you just on something. Not necessarily policy.
That's a good point, because if every time we change the management plan, we also have to get approval from Vermont Land Trust. Right?
Oh,
And then
gosh.
also the select board. So like, if we're changing stuff like this, then it's a huge process, right? Like, we're hopefully doing all of the work now. We're gonna release our second draft of this, and then hopefully, we don't touch it for a decade or whatever, whereas if little rules like that change, then yeah, maybe we need a separate document, which is just like rules of engagement
Right.
for the forest. And then that way, it's like, maybe it still has to go through the select board. I don't know if we're authorized to make those decisions ourselves, but yeah, it could be easily posted on the kiosk. And then it's its own separate thing, and it's not buried in the management plan.
Right.
But how are rules about dogs different than any other rules? Like, why wouldn't that be the case for all the rules then?
That's what I'm at. As a rule, it's from, rule over somewhere else.
Oh.
So that's. Keep on.
So do we need to reference that there will be policy about dogs?
Or, well, somewhere, yeah, I suppose we did. As opposed to here and here. The way the rules are used.
The way mine's where it seems to, is they just have new uses and restricted uses.
Is it in the management plan? The management plan says you can do this, you can't do this. That sounds like rules to me. But that's rules, right? I mean, that's it.
Oh, the easements. Oh, the easements. But they don't. Previous clause.
So the current draft of the management plan, of the revised management plan, addresses dogs and horses. And those recommendations came from the subcommittees that were working in, was it 2023, the trail stewardship group and working group and the comprehensive. So I don't think Brad was in either of those groups. I think
Jim's got something here.
What if we just had Brad write a sentence that says, the committee will continually assess rules published here? Because I do think, I think what you're saying, Brad, is these things might change. You might have issues at times with certain things, and you need to be a little bit nimble. You don't want to rewrite the management plan. You also probably could put in the management plan that this decision is going to be made at this committee, and the select board will sign off on it. And you don't have to do what the science says. No.
We could have a permitted uses section that basically has all of the set in stone permitted and restricted uses that are, dictated by the easement, which will not change, right? It's like motorized vehicle use in the forest, like that's not going to change because that's in the easement, right? So that stuff could be all, in place there, and then there could also be maybe a link that just says additional permitted uses, like see town rules. Or see, ACF rules.
Yeah. Or easily would be independent.
Well, I'm saying that we have our separate document that we're talking about, we're trying to sort of have a separate place to look at the rules that might change. And then that could be one of the bullet points in a permitted uses section that basically has all of these won't change, right? No ATVs, no, this, that, and the other thing that we know are not going to change because that's what's in the easement, right? And then anything that we think might change would be a little bit more flexible, and then that is all sort of a living document that maybe is linked to, separate. That would be a way to.
I think there are a number of differences between the current draft and which is 13 pages long, and Brad's proposal, which is 6. And I think the way that we have to deal with this is that we've got to each sit down with both versions read the long version and find bits that we think are important and ensure that they are written into the shorter version.
We're working on that tonight, right now.
Well, I mean, but can we do that with the available? I'm seeing this as a homework.
So, really, we're done with comments.
Right.
Now is the time.
Well, okay.
So that's why I want you to keep running up through Brad's here so we can continue to look at his.
Also,
Because I think there's a,
to take some of the pressure off,
will
presumably show something of the select. Then we go to this editor writer. I know it's later than one. And the thing, editor writer is back, you can still. So, I mean, when everybody's in the select board, it's not the last time we touch it.
sure.
It's kind of this season.
Ian, can you scroll up so that people can see more of what Brad has written in this? And is there a way to move the comments off of the text so that we can read it?
I might be able to make it.
Are we ready for comments on the text?
Yeah, so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the comments are embedded in this version and not off to one side.
I have a comment. Okay, so on line 96 to 100 or 96 to 99.
Which are you looking at?
Yours.
Still
Yeah. 96 to 99. Reduce erosion, wash out water quality risk by avoiding trail development and slopes, 35%, slopes between 20 and 35%, and encroaching wetlands, contract with a licensed professional and/or engineer and/or wetland specialist, et cetera, et cetera. I called an engineer the other day. I said, hey man, what would you do if somebody came to you with, a review for some trails, like in this kind of situation that have these rules? He said, I don't know what I would do. It doesn't make any sense from an engineering perspective. I think what you want is somebody who is a certified professional in erosion and sediment control. And that is a certification. Some engineers have it. Some engineers don't. Some people have it who are not engineers. You know what I mean? But I think what we're really after is somebody who knows about the erosion and the water control. Yeah.
Maybe this doesn't need to be that specific. It can just say that it follows the town zoning.
Well, I think that was gonna be my thing. What if they need to say that? What if they change?
Well, that's why we just want to say it follows the town zoning regulations.
What if they become more strict? Less strict? What if they say you've got this housing? And we have to relax.
I think that we're just following the town zoning regulations.
Does the easement control for that?
Are you against that? Yeah. You can't go longer. This is matching the town right now. So if this is the town regulation, if the town piece, I mean, in theory, you can still vote for on the state. Especially, well, yeah, follow town in 35, follow town that instead of liking this.
Well, so as Tyler had mentioned that normally if you're developing on slopes between 20% and 35%, then you need a, site plan and the ENS things in place. But the DRB has the ability to waive that. So if we put this in the management plan, then we're essentially holding ourselves to a standard that, is higher. That could end up costing the town, tens of thousands of dollars because we need to hire an engineer to put in a trail. So it kind of could end up, we could shoot ourselves in the foot.
I don't think that the select board would go for having a higher standard than what is in zoning regulations. My understanding is that would be what they would follow. I don't think that they would be likely to approve us having a higher standard than.
Well, the only way we would have a higher standard would be if the lower. Is that issue? That's your town standard.
Well, I guess you'd have to put a.
But except maybe for the DRB.
Well, that's what we're saying, if they win it. if they
Does the
win
town
it.
standard reference trails?
Or that's that conversation with Tyler, which is very.
A lot of towns, a lot of towns do trail.
My
It's
sense
really-
is we
it's not-
should, yeah, that seems like not something that we would specify. I mean, any trail that we were talking about building professionally, no trail builder would build an actual steep trail because it would get washed out there. And so I think that's a situation where the committee would use best practices and they would choose slopes that were appropriate. If, you know, if it's a,
Right.
yeah, it's interesting because
It's platform. What's we're gonna go some changes. And this town property.
I mean, the situation that seems like it just does not get addressed here is, let's say it's a 30-degree slope in general, right? But there's a great corridor to put a 5-degree slope trail across it that is the best spot. And it's obvious to all of us via the eye that
15%.
so it just seems so situational where there's the actual sustainable trail would not fit the box.
Yeah, and follow town zoning guidance. 2.5 of the zoning guidance is like, yeah.
And it does, I think.
Except if the town decides down the road that trails do not count as development in zoning.
We'd still be following the town policy
Yeah.
then,
And then
though, because
conversely,
would
like if
be-
Brad's saying some
be-
towns go that route,
then-
well, maybe Richmond will, and we
Yeah.
should be ahead of that. That we're gonna follow the town.
We're following the advice that Tyler Marshall presented at great length and great detail. I mean,
Yeah. if we
He
follow the
explained
zoning
that-
administrator-
yeah,
But he's also, what Tyler did was just interpret what's in the zoning regulations. He's still abiding by the zoning regulations of the town.
Yeah.
He's giving us his best interpretation of what it means.
Yeah. that's it.
So following, saying, we're gonna follow the town zoning guidelines,
Yeah.
that could save us a lot of work. And a lot of, it could align with what's already there. And then you look at those other rules in the document that you've written, not rules, but guidelines, I suppose, or objectives. And then we align.
Yeah.
And I don't think Tyler is doing that in a vacuum. He's
No.
getting advice from the town attorney and the town manager as he's writing his letter. To make sure that he is
Give them the best
reading
advice.
the zoning, or he complying with zoning law.
He said something though that gave me pause, where he said, even if it's, and I'm gonna paraphrase, even if it's illogical, I have to follow it literally. And if the town decides then to change it because it's illogical, that's on them. But I have to just follow it literally and interpret it as.
Yeah, and that's the role of the DRB to say.
Right.
Well,
Let's be reasonable.
It's 32%, and then
And there's no building.
I thought of the totality of what he said as mostly being top to the
Since.
There was talk that there would be update the town plan which informs the zoning reg, right? Like if you want.
Yeah.
If you want to put a definition of a trail in the town plan, then, that would.
Right, yeah.
That would be to inform the reg. You could interpret this completely different, that you're looking up definitions and develop like using variables or stuff, right? Because there's a lack of specificity in what we have.
That's what I-
So there's still pathways, yeah, through the DRB or through updating the plans, to change some of this stuff. But I do agree that I think that it makes sense to kind of just update this to say, follow the town zoning regulations.
Yeah.
For responsible trail development.
Right, right, and that doesn't mean that, we can't keep the ZOI stuff in there, because that
Yeah.
makes sense, it's another guideline, when we're thinking about building trails and such.
What, I'm sorry, what is?
Sorry, so back on line 88, in other words, do we just strike it all and say, look at the town guidance? I don't think we do. I think there's a lot of guidance in here that's quite useful. But where we're just repeating town guidance, we just say, look at the town zoning rules. Yeah.
Just say reduce erosion washout and water following.
Yeah. Yeah, see section, 2.5 of the zoning rules. The zoning rules, right.
Parentheses. See zoning administrative letter of December 2024.
Does that kind of stuff go in the management plans?
All right.
The one about the town, about the zoning? So moved. Yeah, I would accept that task. Sure. All right, so where we're looking, where it looks like we might just be repeating what's already in the zoning guidance, I'll just say something to the effect of, look at zoning guidance for further guidance, or something more eloquent than that.
And if we scroll down beyond that section, then we get into the
I have one above that
management
section.
section.
I have a section above that section that I wanted to.
You
What line?
bring up. 55, 53.
To 955.
Yeah. I think like the reality of the number of parking spots there, and the multi-use nature of it is that it's not going to be a diverse mountain bike network that would be like really marketed towards mountain bikers. And so I just think gearing this towards multi-use access, rather than a strong emphasis on like different types of, maybe you all feel differently, but I think rather than different types, it says like include routes for beginners and more experienced bikers. I think I'm proposing the lens of multi-use trails that could be a good fit for runners, hikers, mountain bikers.
Usually, people get nervous when the biker comes up and bikers will never, turn these walkers from earbuds in and suddenly there's so when I know slightly.
Yeah.
But I don't really see enough. But that's.
Well, I think I wanted it as a discussion, not as a.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Continue our wide range, but I think that one, I was just trying to get to the point, the other week, but.
Yeah.
For mountain bike. So, let's do what we can to make more of those.
Okay, yeah, maybe there's no downside to it. I think at this point, Richmond Trails or Richmond Mountain Trails, even as the mountain bike organization, is very interested in building multi-use trails and would be surprised to be asked to build mountain bike specific.
We did talk though about having trails that were multi-use and some trails that were not multi-use.
Yeah.
And that was a hot demand coming out of some public meetings and also the select board, yes. Yep. Yep.
Or a couple little. Dana's climb and then
The noodle bowl.
one on the top.
So there's still.
No, you could go up the road and down the pedestrian trail. Yeah. Bikers could be on the road.
Right.
Yeah, the road is multi-use.
Yeah.
But the road's wide, yeah.
And straight.
I guess I'm just thinking, I understand the ecological concept of high density trails in one area, but I don't see there being the level of traffic with only 8 parking spots to really warrant that much density in the lower area. I mean, if you end up with 10 trails, like a few mountain bike trails, a few walking trails, a few multi-use, they're all in the same area. I don't think there's enough parking to support use of those trails.
So, yeah.
So,
Oh, no, no.
no, I just think a high density trail network might not be realistic with that. I think it's a great as like a smaller net. And
But who's proposing high density?
Well,
yeah,
this is
I mean,
ripping
this
on
isn't
the
particularly
expand the
proposing.
boundary.
Maybe that's a different conversation.
What
I,
about just that, why don't we just do it?
well,
Close.
I think it's a lot harder to put back in once it's out.
But they will continue to. This next year. Yeah, there's enough trail spread. It's to run a lot. You know, additionally, a lot. Most of the river trail. Reasonable pace, but it's just.
Visibility is not great.
And I think a lot of it, that's. What do you say?
I do want to ask you, sorry, Jim, but Brad pointed out that the first objective says wide range of recreation opportunities for hikers, bikers, hunters, walkers, runners, nature observers, skiers, snowshoers, and others. I mean, that's a broad net, and it gives a lot of opportunity for interpretation of the rules and for specific changes over time as different members of the committee come on. I mean, we want to set limits without limiting ourselves as well. So I mean, I think that first objective is pretty good. The one before it that says, sorry, line 21, sorry.
The one before it encompasses the
I'd like to make an interruption here that with Cecilia on the line, we're running towards 8 o'clock. I think we should really try and take advantage of Cecilia to comment on the Indigenous land recognition aspects,
Okay,
which
but before we leave this
Yeah.
one, If everybody could take, before the next meeting, do take the time to read back through this, what's in the original one. And we're gonna have the goal of completely checking this section off.
Yep.
Before the end of the next meeting.
I make one more.
Yes.
Stand. For the way, maybe we leave mountain biking in the list of permitted uses, so to speak, farther up.
That's what I was trying to.
Yeah, that's kind of maybe in terms of things progress over the next year, a couple of years, maybe the emphasis is on a pedestrian-only trail, and the rest of the mountain biking trails that have been talked about just get pushed down the road, and see how a pedestrian trail lands with the community, how the town forest is utilized with such a trail in place, and then talk about, you know, the future at that time.
So 2 or 3 meetings ago, we had a guest who was working on proposed trail designs potentially for
BYCC Maple Lane, and we like to propose trails for Indigenous. And I think I'd like us to continue to include mountain bike because there is the public's desire to mountain bike at some level on this property, east-west or a north-south. And then, I think this is the document that we're pretty close on that allows us to get there.
I agree. I think if we exclude mountain bikes entirely, we're gonna have the opposite issue with the select board. They're gonna be like, well, yeah, you went from bike park to no bikes. Well, that's also, you know.
But there's no objective that says.
Sure, no, I agree. I think we should just get rid of the section and it's like, it can be included in the one above.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, also the reality of, it's a community that puts a ton of work into maintaining trails and building really high quality trails. It brings in a lot of resources for that. And so
Yeah,
keeping that community out would be.
absolutely. I think. Slow. And that's. You might as a committee, we kind of have.
Yeah. My lens is so much a density lens. Like I take my older parents hiking at Preston all the time. We see mountain bikers, and that's like how I've made half my friends in this town. We stop and talk for a second.
You put your parents on a leash there?
No, I mean, I think generally people see you coming and they say, and for every, 50 good experiences, there's one where someone's not quite in control. Yeah, the river trail is its own thing. When the ferns are big and you can't see around the corners.
So
yeah,
it's not hard to. Wonderful person. Present on the trail, on the bike.
Yeah.
Can I say one last one about this one? 2 seconds. Well, just that I think that you're right that Brad's document gets us pretty close. I think the only thing that that first objective is very inclusive of a lot of different activities. I think one thing that you are referring to that the select board made very clear that they want us to include, I think we all agree, is that some trails should not be multi-use.
That's true.
That's one thing that we're really missing.
Yeah.
They've said that.
And there's a few other comments I'm sure you can make a use of it. Let's keep that on there and then, fulfill the task that we were given by the select board after.
And we have our homework for next week.
So yes, if you could all just read the section that was originally there, the section that Brad has rewritten so that we can come back and just finish this off, check the box, move what needs to go in appendix to that. And it's what we want it to be, objectives, items.
So,
And we're gonna move on to Cecilia.
yeah,
Can you hear
and
us?
Cecilia, I think we've communicated about the section.
Indigenous
There's 2.4 with
recognition.
2.4, which is about Indigenous land recognition and Indigenous people and language and everything else. And there's a long appendix. And there's also a short statement that we're supposed to be posting at the kiosk and elsewhere. What I want to raise here, though, Cecilia, with your insights, is that there's been a question about whether we should be to what extent we can specify Abenaki as the people who I think unquestionably were present in this, what is now Vermont previously, but there's a question about those who've been recognized by the state as Abenaki really should qualify. So the question is, are there any parts of these sections of the document that should recognize this controversy? And are we able, and I think that's a secondary question, are we able to do that? We'd love to hear your advice, Cecilia, because you're the one in contact with us, but would we need to go beyond the committee and maybe have the select board or some town officials look into it?
So, and over just a little bit. So this document is going to the select board on May 22nd as a revised draft management plan for consideration at their June 2nd meeting. Is there anything in the document as it stands now that we need to change before then based on what you said?
Yeah.
For that section?
Okay,
So it's just, yeah, thanks.
yeah, I just want to make sure I'm all caught up. And so, so there's a couple things. One, as some may recall who were there or participated, the appendix, we wanted it all in one place because, one of the critiques of land acknowledgements is, oh, so you wrote this land acknowledgement, but now what are you going to do about it, with that knowledge that you just acknowledged? And so we tried to put all those pieces into the appendix, so it'd be all there in one place. And we know what we agreed to in the past when we were working with local tribes who at the time were not as deeply contested as they are now. And other things, resources I use to write the cultural history, I think are still, valid. Abenaki, Western Abenaki people were here. There is a record of them on the land. So I think we're all good in that respect. Yes, there are things we should change. So we talk about representation on the committee by an Abenaki tribal citizen. We don't name a particular tribe. We don't even name a country. But the complication is that, people on the committee have to be residents of Richmond. So that might be a kind of unrealistic one, and one where we'd have to sort through whose recognition we're going to go with, which is not something I think we should be doing at the town level. So I can work on the appendix to sort of clarify our understanding of the Abenaki presence here, but maybe change wording around how Abenaki tribal citizens would participate. So we talked about having an advisor or having one sitting on the committee. I think there are other ways to get valid input. And at this point in time, choosing a side is probably not something we should do. So I could work on changing that language. So if the committee would like, with your suggestions, of course. The second thought was I had tried then, the whole point is you put that all in one place, you can see, what our understanding and commitments and what we acknowledge. But then some of these can be operationalized in all different parts of our management. So then I went back and I tried to reinsert it in the management plan at different places. And that's something I'm not sure did or will survive the edits, because I was trying to follow what you guys were doing with what I saw online. I think I might have been looking at the wrong document. But I'm guessing there's another chance for me to go through at some point and sort of compare, as you guys were talking earlier, the old document and the new one, because I had stuck that wording in throughout the document in that that intermediate draft. So it's not the original one that was approved by the select board, but the one that we had edited like over a year ago. Does that make sense to anybody have questions? Which I might not be able to hear, so somebody might have to relay them to Ian or Chase.
What, I'm wondering, we should have a standing agenda item. But this is on the agenda, each meeting.
I think someone's talking and I can't hear them.
The laptop. I don't think it's-
Cecilia, how about making this a standing agenda item? So each meeting we have at least some conversation about this. So it's never really lost. Is that possible?
Yeah, I don't know how that, I mean, I thought at some point we could put it on future agendas, sure, but you mean just up until we actually get a draft before the select
The
board?
next two meetings, yes, we should have it on definitely.
Oh, I was thinking forever. That
Alright.
as a commitment to this idea of, who is here before us, we continually talk about how to
Yeah, I
include
still
that
think
in
it
our-
would be,
in our efforts.
yeah, I mean, that's lovely. There's all kinds of things we should talk about at every meeting, I suppose. But it would be good to have some things down in the management plan, like, how we would manage for certain culturally important plants. There's already been, talk about the importance of ash or other things. It kind of fits everywhere, from naming of trails, interpretive, recreational things. There's lots of places where it fit, and I tried to do that in the past. And we can always talk about it, but I think it should be reflected in the management plan in various places.
One
Yeah.
other thing, the Hunter Town Forest does something that's kind of interesting. They have a related goals item in every single management objective that seems to be related goals. And maybe that's something where all of this stuff can be,
What does that mean?
well,
I'm not hearing any of this, by the way.
Yeah, sorry, he's saying that there are in the Heinsberg Town Forest, there's a related goals section. And that's every section.
section has the opportunity to relate to every other section. Here's a few ways that.
Right. So, oh, related, I see what you're saying. Right, sorry. So just so you can hear, Cecilia, so there's a section for sort of cross-referencing goals, basically, where the goals in the management plan say, this also relates to goal 2.6 or 2.7. The town plan apparently does it. So that could be a section where we could cross-reference some of these goals that we're talking about now with other goals in the plan. Does that make sense, Cecilia?
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't written up as a goal-like document necessarily, this appendix. I mean, if we wanted to take the content of it and, craft it to fit a little bit more with the rest of the thing and move it up into the main part of the document and have goals identified around it, that's a possibility. I just didn't want to lose all the parts. If we just pull one part out and put the acknowledgement in one place, and we put the trail naming in the recreation section, and we put group events in another section, or under, management of invasives and other species of priority might go in another section. So I wanted it all together someplace. So if that's the way we decide to deal with overarching goals, I mean, every time you build a trail, you're meeting multiple goals. You're meeting accessibility goals and recreation goals and ecological goals and cultural goals. So, yeah, there's different options of where we can put this. It depends on, I seem to not be seeing the same thing, like what's on the screen right now that somebody's sharing that says objective actions. It says it's in a recreation appendix. That wasn't in our meeting packet, right? I didn't see it listed online.
That's right, it was in last month's meeting packet.
It was in last month's. Okay. I just was trying to figure out where it was, because there could be places in terms of objectives and goals. where we could put, things related to Abenaki stewardship.
But Cecilia, my concern is that whereas the state has named Abenaki people as being both historically and currently in the present, the ones that are recognized by the state, there's this, yes, I understand it. And as there was a delegation that came from Quebec to the State House and said, look, your people in the state of Vermont are recognizing the wrong people. There's a controversy there. So when we specify Abenaki people in a historical sense, I think we're correct, and there's no question about that. If we specify that in the future we will welcome Abenaki people, we will use Abenaki input on some of this decision making. Are we using the wrong term? Should we continue to be specific about Abenaki people, or should we be saying Indigenous people and sort of hedging bets that way? And what do the rules demand of us, given that the state has made this official recognition of Abenaki tribe?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I think the word Abenaki is fine. There's 4 named and recognized tribes in the state, and that they are not listed in this so I think it's fair. Like I said, I would offer to go through this and sort of remove references when we talk about Abenaki tribal citizens. When we originally wrote that, we meant one of the 4 bands, recognized by the state. Now that's not just contested, but highly contested. And I'm well aware of that, having had my department host the Odanak Abenaki a couple of times now on campus. And so I think there are ways to still recognize Abenaki people. The question is incorporating them directly is different than incorporating, cultural practices. So like I said, I think I can edit the appendix to better, reflect the current state of conflict. That is one that we cannot resolve. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, Cecilia. Thank you very much. And we'll look for that maybe for the next one. We have 2 more meetings before this is shipped off. So
okay.
Thank you very much. And we're going to move on. We just have a few more minutes left. We're going to save our report from the walk and the FEMC webinar for our next meeting. We're going to touch really quickly on vacancies. So if you are applying or reapplying, the deadline is April 4th for consideration at the May select board meeting for June appointments.
With a cycle of opinions on trails and conservation commission.
Continue on. We're going to skip over delaying the recruitment of a professional management writer for next time. I think we've really cut out in our work and just trying to get this document hashed out and ready to ship. Update about our input to the town plan. Is there anything in just like a couple of minutes that we need to know about that?
We have a question, a couple questions in the document to Virginia, just for some clarification. We can report, hopefully we're that.
Okay, great. Great. Okay, so we're going to use our last couple of minutes for direction for our next meeting.
Work through, in addition to or changes to what we realized in this meeting, working on last time, which of course is variation. Is there anything else or different ways that people would like to see this part?
So one of the questions that pops out is like, it's written in this draft now, no trails or no bikes above the power lines. And that feels like maybe a bigger conversation.
No new trail.
Yeah,
Above
and
the
the
box.
concept, I understand the concept. You're pitching a concept of two distinct zones of the forest, right? And that is an interesting concept, and I think that we should dive into and agree on separate from. Yeah, it's like a big concept.
Yeah, that's part of, obviously, that's part of recreation, so we're focusing on recreation.
Well, I
Within
think of it as
recognition,
bigger.
down
I
recreation.
mean, I guess it is part of recreation, but it plays into our whole, if we adopt that as a framework, it plays into a lot of
So,
conversation.
yes.
No, so, I mean, I think it's a little underselling it if we just say, all right, let's vote. Do we want trails above or below? Because it's a framework that you're proposing. It's really interesting and we should all think about it.
I think probably John and some needs to consider that. There's going to be a man to think about
Well, I'm saying before, like, it's written in here right now that that's the framework and there will be no trails above. There.
So that's in your view.
That's in the rewrite, yeah. And that's not something any of us have talked about.
No, it's in the activities.
Yeah.
And
So I think.
I highlighted and put a comment there.
The rewrite that Brad has written in its entirety for homework for reading,
Yeah.
along with the original section of recreation, so everybody can be well
look
read
at
in one color.
when we get to ecology, because in a way we're backing into,
I hear
I mean,
you.
we think by that recreation, we're back in. All this recreation, they want us to go general, these, way these, go through the general. piece. So if we start talking about it, so I think we need to frame it. And I think it's really where ecology is. That we have a
We will allow time for the ecology section in the next meeting. Here's the reality, Brad. We just want to make sure everybody understands this. This document is going, however it is, to the select board on May 27th. I don't care what you say, it's going, Brad. That's the way it is. So don't say anymore, it's going. So we want it to be as best as it can be. And we will consider ecology. You are going to work with Ian on the agenda for the next meeting. Make sure it's on the agenda, that recreation will be on it too. We have to get this done. I don't think we really have a choice.
Really, but I fear that if we rush with them, it's not always going to do that. We say, why don't you go back and take a look? I can't freak out too much about that. You could always go and ask them. I think we went in there with a good progress report. I mean, what we did was a great discussion. And so, we're charging and we're making pretty some progress on this. But we've got a couple of technical issues. I did. And I say that with a lot of caution, because I don't want to use that as an excuse to swap off on this one and say, oh, this is we really need to be there. But we just can't start jumping over. Leave it out.
Yeah.
That's all.
I'm kind of seeing we're approaching the same conversations from different angles. And we could talk, and the things that we're going to get stuck on, we'll find through either of these.
Yeah, I think that if we go at it from like a trails perspective, then there will be sort of counter arguments to what we're talking about when we discuss it at that meeting, right?
Right.
So, from like,
Ecological.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not like we're throwing the thing out entirely and just saying, well, we'll get to this after, because just like if we started with ecological, then we might have like a trails part being like, well, we just said that we're gonna put no new trails above the power lines, and that's how we're gonna stick to the trails development. Either way, one side or the other is probably gonna end up feeling like that's the wrong way to do it, right? So we gotta pick one. And of the opposing argument or, you know, or.
And ultimately, in the management plan, there can be room, you know, we're creating a framework for this discussion in a lot of ways. We're talking about what we are going to think about when this discussion happens. You don't necessarily have to this time, right? The management plan highlights the important considerations that people in 10 years.
So I would just like to say one more thing about time. I think these are all really good points. So to put it in perspective, we have 4 hours or less to wrap this up and be sent to the management plan.
To produce something that we would not be embarrassed by. Right now, the recreation section, it would be embarrassing to send that to the.
And I also, the context of the conversation with the select board was that it was going to include a trail. That was my whole thing is, do you want just the trail plan or the management plan and the trail together?
Yeah, I just don't know. But I think from last meeting, different people had very different takeaways. I guess that's something that was also discussed in the RCC meeting. It was like RCC had a vastly different opinion of what the select board had told us than various people like you had basically decided.
And regardless of what the select board said, and you kind of said this last time, Sam, I think having a management plan to guide a trail plan really does make most sense. And so as soon as the management plan, you know, those words are chosen, then you can have that conversation. Say, wait a minute, this is a, you know, very impactful trail on ecologically sensitive area.
Yeah, we can't draw the lines on the map like within 2 months. Yeah, have the management plan done and also have like the trail design done with the select board as well. But if we have the words written on the page, then we have the framework that we're adhering to put those trails, right? So I thought that was the plan, like that was my take on what the select board was saying. And that's kind of what I thought we were asking ourselves like a few months ago when we decided to go to the select board. And that's why the select board said, go from the general to the specific, the general being, here are the general guidelines the trail should be adhering to. And the specific being, here's the actual trail in the forest.
And we can,
to all these general guidelines.
yeah, we can go to the minutes and we can go to the recording, the video recording of that select board meeting. If we're.
Well, and I think what you're saying, Chase, too, like, you know, the way Julian noticed, maybe that bullet point was slightly too specific and potentially, you know, unnecessary. Maybe what you're seeing, you know, line of the power is maybe better captured in phrases that are not specific.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is what we need to make time for at our next meeting, right? Like that's like probably the big thing that we need to like hash out. Like one of the biggest things we need to hash out from like a more philosophical level rather than the actual sentence.
The only caution I have on that, Jim, and it does sound good, but you know, are we just kicking the can down the road and are we putting those, you know,
I think
horrible meetings, you know, down the road when.
I think we are because we want to get the management plan done.
Well, yeah, okay, but we're maybe dooming ourselves to endless argument.
The perspective, I mean, I think I kind of agree with you on this one because we are bound to have that discussion within the management team. And we're stuck in the management team forevermore. And if we agree on the outline of the framework, we get the management plan, then we can pull our hair over the trails, and then we're specifically about the trails, and not about section 2.2 and 2.7 and 7.4, but only about those things. Then we can focus. Because part of the problem is that there's so little time and so much to do that it's very hard to focus on one particular thing for that amount of time. So I love the idea of getting the management plan good enough, that it's specific enough, that it's meaningful, general enough, that it is workable within the changing circumstances, time and membership. And then we get into the specifics of I think that is a reasonable, that would be my suggestion for that. Because you're right, we can't avoid it. It's now or later, but I mean, now we've got so many things on the plate.
That's the big issue. The big issue. The other stuff's going to be easy.
Sure. If we have a framework to discuss it, if we have the framework to discuss it, we have the big sort of objectives and activities and goals. then we can, wrestle over whether we're meeting the goal of the specific rules that then get post later on. And we don't have to discuss, it's not, because it's always like, okay, but we gotta get to the management plan, The management plan is easy. And I don't think we're gonna solve the details of what we want for trails through the management plan, except that the management plan will give us the framework within which to discuss the trail concept.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to fear that because the management doesn't prohibit something specifically, that it's somehow get out.
Right.
I think that
Or that it's allowed.
We have that we have to resolve.
Yeah.
It says you gotta protect all this natural stuff, right?
Yeah,
And you gotta provide recreation. So, wow.
bacon cookies and
The
a
thing-
lot of ingredients.
Yeah, I fight against those being conflicting goals. That's like a rhetoric that feels like it's taken on a life.
So I will be sending out the homework for our next meeting, and it's going to include, well, we've talked about the documents. I'll make sure that everyone has the documents that need to be on the plate for our homework for next meeting.
Thank you to everyone. This has been a lot. We got some stuff done. Yeah. And thanks for all of your hard work and all things.
Thanks for keeping us.
It is really
Yeah.
hard.
Is there any advantage, is there any advantage of the next meeting? Meet for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to trying to build in any additional time, either that's like slightly longer meetings the next 2 times we meet, or one additional session, because
When's the next one?
28th and 19th is what I see.
Yes. It's the 28th and the 19th. So May 19th will be our last one before it goes to the select board. So, I can bring some food.
I can't do those.
Okay, we'll talk about food if we're allowed, right? to talk
So
about-
do we want-
You can also probably ask the select board for food money.
What would you like?
Get, guys, the limit, yeah.
So the question is like, how long of a meeting?
2.5.
Yeah, 2.5.
2.5 is good.
2.5.
Because I think
Go
3 is too long
Three's
to start
long,
to lose focus, but I think we could hit 2.5.
So we want to try to plan on 2:45 for the next 2 to give us 5 hours.
So starting at 6.
6 to
Till
8:30.
Okay.
Can we maintain that?
Some money.
Yes, we can do it for 2 meetings.
I think it's smart to add it to the meeting instead of a separate meeting. Like, I feel like there's a certain amount of time it takes to get the momentum
Yeah.
going in the meeting, and then the meeting ends, right? So if we can get a slightly longer meeting, I think that we can get more done than that.
I move to adjourn.
Thanks for writing.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment? All right.